Tonight's episode of the Masonic Roundtable is brought to you again by our good friends at Masonic Revival. Brother Mike, you seem to be wearing one of Edgar's new hats. Tell us a little bit about it.
I am. It's really nice. I like it. It's got the nice square and compasses over here, and very nice, and it's actually nice and sturdy. It doesn't want to seem to go flat on me here, and my wife actually likes this when I'm allowed to wear it. So.
Yes, so that should be Brother Edgar's new tagline. Mason and wife approved.
Looks so good, your wife will let you wear it.
That's right.
Yeah, actually, go if you all haven't done this in a couple weeks, go on to MasonicRevival.com. Edgar just pushed out a bunch of new stuff to include hats and some other cool items. So he makes some great quality stuff. Everybody here at the Masonic Roundtable loves it. And for those of you who might be interested in, yes, he made Mike Hambrecht's past high priest or royal arch apron. Sorry.
Yep. Yeah.
With then on the, myself.
Yeah. Then on the backside has the cryptic council.
Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, for those of you who may have been thinking about becoming one of our patrons on Patreon, Brother Edgar is printing our new exclusive Patreon only TMR pins, and they're pretty awesome. So yeah, Masonic Revival, great store. We love Edgar, and he does some really quality work. So go ahead and check it out. Isn't it time for Masonic Revival?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is, Barry. Yes, it is.
All right.
I'm so glad somebody finally finished that question.
Okay. Hello and good evening, and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. The standard disclaimer applies. The thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, you can head on over to the Facebook event page for episode 242, St. John the Evangelist, or you can follow along live with us on the YouTube chat running alongside this window over here, and put your 2 cents in, and it'll be recorded there for all prosperity. So guard yourself. My name is John Ruark. I'm a past master of the Patriot Lodge number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia. So welcome, and Robert, introduce yourself, please.
I'm Robert Johnson, a past master of Waukegan Lodge number 78 in Waukegan, Illinois, and a current sitting secretary of Space Novum Lodge number 1183 under dispensation of the Grand Lodge of the great state of Illinois.
Well, great. Next up.
Great.
Mike the
Totally great.
How's it going, Mike?
Hey, Mike the intern here from Triandria Lodge number 780 in Rock Creek, Ohio, where I am the junior deacon and lodge education officer. Good evening.
Good evening. Next up, Juan Sepulveda.
Hello, everybody. Juan Sepulveda here, lodge historian for Orange Blossom Lodge number 80 in Kissimmee, Florida. The host of the Winding Stairs Freemasonry podcast with new episodes in the new year. Stay tuned.
All right, there's going to be a pop quiz on your lodge history here, so be ready.
Ready.
Ready and ready. Ready as always. Last but not least, Jason Richards. Hi, Jason.
Hi, John. Good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for coming and listening to us and watching us tonight. My name is Jason Richards. I'm a past master of Vacation Lodge number 16 in Clifton, Virginia, and member of the Colonial Lodge number 1821 in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. And back to me. So before we move into this week's topic, just one reminder, we have a Patreon page set up for all of you who want to help contribute and support the show. And we actually have a little surprise along the way. You've heard about the pin that's being pressed as we speak. So stand by for that, as well as we've been working on, actually even as late as today, been working on a private Facebook group where we can kind of converse with you all private, just the patrons. There's always a few of us in the Winding Stairs Facebook group, of course, But you get the extra special attention if you become a patron, and you can kind of interact with us before the show. And we've already run a couple polls about what you, the patrons, want to see coming up next, because your vote matters. So lots of cool things coming, and we're making good on those promises. So so thank you for all of you who've already helped support the show. It means a lot. It gives us flexibility to add more content, and we already have some things planned for the next year as well. So after the dust settles from the Christmas holiday, we'll start rolling out some new things early next year. So stay tuned for that. Now, moving into this week's topic, we want to talk about St. John the Evangelist, because today, if you are watching this live as it's being recorded on December 27th, 2018, it is the feast day of St. John the Evangelist. And so Mike wanted to kind of lay out some research that he did regarding St. John the Evangelist. Now, for our diehard TMR fans, you may remember we did a St. John the Evangelist episode all the way back in episode 47, almost 200 episodes ago. It's really hard to believe. So we were just in our infancy at that point.
It was 4 years ago.
Wow. Woo. Amazing. So we wanted to, it's about time to dust that topic off. And now that we have Mike the intern on, have him kind of lead the discussion with some of his research, as well as all of our thoughts and opinions on that. So Mike, will you lead the way on
yes.
the Evangelist?
Now, kind of before I hit this, I'm going to let everybody know most of my material came from Encyclopedia of Freemasonry by A.E. Waite, Mackey's Encyclopedia also. And then there's actually an article from the Midnight Freemasons titled St. John the Evangelist by Worshipful Brother James Fry. So I wanted to just make that point clear, because some of this, as I read it, may actually sound very familiar if you've read it. So,
well, hold on just a moment there, Mike. Right off the bat, I have to say, wow, because you're using two references that I think take some nuts. Number one is A.E. Waite.
Anything A.E. Waite.
Because let me just tell you, A.E. Waite for a lot of folks is too symbolic. It's like somewhat the deepest of the deep in certain aspects. You're talking about a guy who wrote a tarot deck, which is pretty incredible. And then James Fry. Well, Jim Fry is probably one of the most interesting esotericists alive today in terms of personal practice. So kudos on diving into that stuff, because it is not easy to do. So, and I mean intellectually and academically, it can be some thick work. So,
oh yeah,
looking forward to it.
Thanks. So December 7th is a day of joyous celebration, the Feast of St. John the Evangelist, one of our Gentle Crafts day of celebration. This celebration is always near the winter solstice. Winter solstice is generally December 22nd or the 21st. Who is John the Evangelist, and what does he have to do with Freemasonry? Well, John the Evangelist is also known as the Apostle, called the Evangelist because there is some belief that he wrote the Gospel of St. John, the 3 epistles, and Revelations. Of the 4 Gospels, only John claims to be an eyewitness to the testimony of the disciple whom Jesus loved. There are many varying opinions on this, but it is obvious that the Gospel of St. John stands apart from the other 3 Gospels, whose authorship is equally unknown. All documented evidence shows that St. John the Evangelist did not become connected to the craft until long after the 16th century. Before that time, St. John the Baptist was the patron saint of Masonry. So why the Evangelist? Why add him to this? Well, John's constant admonitions in his epistles to the cultivation of brotherly love and the mystical nature of apocalyptic visions in Revelations are perhaps the principal reasons for the veneration paid to him in the craft. Masonry also regards the memorable incident of the beloved disciple resting his head in the heart of his divine master as symbolizing an initiate or an intimate communication between them on the subject of the secret doctrine of Christ. This would have been when he received the instructions of the secret mysteries that he later communicated so faithfully to the other disciples. Why else the evangelist? He is also called the apostle of charity, which may be part of his connection to Freemasonry. Could it be his unwavering resolve and purity of his love of the divine? Of St. John the Evangelist, the disciple whom Jesus loved, 1,000 books have been written, and student has vied with minister, teacher, and historian to find words fitly to describe the character of the gentle writer of the fourth gospel. Suffice it that St. John the Evangelist is recognized the world over as the apostle of love and light, the bringer of comfort to the grief-stricken, of courage to the weak, of the help to the helpless, of the strength to the failing. More particularly, if we look at St. John the Evangelist symbolically within the context of the Masonic journey, John is the individual initiate. John was initiated by John the Baptist into the mysteries and purified similarly to how the entered apprentice is given a white apron to represent a new sense of purity. John travels with his master and was indoctrinated in the parables of truth, similar to the fellowcraft traveling the different compartments of the temple and being indoctrinated with the spiral staircase leading to truth. Similar to the master mason, John is witness to the death and resurrection of his master. Then, fitting into the mythos of the Masonic lost word, John referred to Christ as the Word. Within the death and resurrection of Christ, the true word of gnosis is lost. Through the mystery of the spiritual fire of the Pentecost, the word is again found within his own soul. The lost word is the individual soul of the initiate and the connection to the redemptive energy of the Christos. So, and that's, that was so that I could actually lead a discussion at my lodge. So that's why there's so much information, but so little directly. So,
which is great because I hate long fluff pieces, right? You packed it all in there, which is awesome because it gives us lots of avenues to unpack. And I'll take the liberty to kind of start because in my research for why St. John the Evangelist, if you do any research, you're going to have a hard time finding a direct correlation, right? And so that implies that it was added as a symbolic thing later, especially when you mentioned that up to the 16th century, John the Baptist was just the patron saint of Freemasonry, right, where it was added on later, St. John the Evangelist. So why the evangelist? Well, if you look at the synoptic gospels, right, the four first gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, John's gospel is very different to the previous three. Not only was it written much later, it also is much more philosophical. It's much more aligned to being one and reaching atonement with the Creator.
It's also I believe, one of the only gospels that focuses on the actual divinity of Christ.
Correct, right? Because the different ones focus on whether he was the king or whether he was the Messiah, and this one,
the Son of Man, is thrown around a lot in the first three gospels, and that has been taken to mean son of God, but it wasn't actually the case, given the historical context of those writings. But in the case of John's gospel, as you were mentioning, John, yes, he's actually talks about the divinity of Christ.
Mm-hmm. And so it's because it's a different gospel. And let's hold that for a second, because then we get into the authorship of it as well, where you led off with the fact that it's generally assumed that the Gospel of John was written by John the Apostle, and also wrote the three letters from John, and then the Book of Revelations. There's lots of claims about, is it the same guy? Is it not the same guy? But generally, the majority of scholars, not all of them, but the majority of scholars will say it's the same guy, even though it was written much later than the three predecessor gospels.
I mean, considering that it's written by the same guy, it's written by a guy whose writings were copied and rewritten 1,000 times. So, kind of by the same guy.
Well, no, that's a good point, because a little bit of behind the scenes here, a lot of our discussion and kind of goes to a book that a lot of us have read, led by Jason. So, Jason, can you hear us? I know you said you might have some audio issues. Anyway, I know that Bart Ehrman, just going on a tangent, is an author who's written on the historical Jesus, and he's written many books, of which a few of us have read some of his works that talk about trying to find the historical precedents for where the books of the Bible came from. So that's why we're kind of adding a lot of caveats in here that we can't even prove that John, the Gospel of John, was written by John. That being said, even if it wasn't, now we'll just look at it from a symbolic perspective. What does the Gospel of John say about the symbolic philosophical theology that goes with what he's trying to say about Christ in the Bible, right? So, it being more of a spiritual thing, another little thing to consider is that a lot of Gnostic belief systems are foundational in a lot of the Book of John, right? Because it talks about, as you mentioned as well, the Logos and the Word, right? That in the beginning, the Word was with God and the Word was God. So that starts to put some things together with Freemasonry about a lost word, about the Gnostic influence of Freemasonry, and then how that may or may not be related. We did an episode earlier about Gnosticism and Freemasonry, so you can see that same gospel of John the Evangelist was influential in tying some of these philosophies together.
Yeah, just very quickly, and I can excuse me, I can field a few questions about this if need be. But Rudolf Steiner in 1906, when he was in Berlin, wrote a paper, well, a lecture rather, where he was one of the first people to claim that John is Lazarus, and that so that when Lazarus dies, he's not dead. Essentially, this is a ritual rite of passage where Lazarus must remain in a tomb for a period of time, and then Jesus calls him out. And when he raises Lazarus, he's literally raising Lazarus in a similar manner that we would call raising, to the third degree. Or that's just a, not saying that they do the same thing, but it's just a throw to the, an homage to that. And that for forevermore, this is, you don't hear about John until after Lazarus is raised. So he's saying, he makes this case that that Lazarus, now raised to the mysteries by Jesus himself, is now John, who is the man who is so prophetic, Nostradamus-esque in his writings. And it's just very fascinating to me. I will send, I don't know if John or Jason does the show notes, but I'll send the paper up. It's the First Gospel of St. John by Rudolf Steiner, 1906, delivered in Berlin. If you type that in, you could find it. It's not short, but it's a little longer, but it's really cool.
Which is really fascinating when we think about John being an influence to some of the Gnostic and even mystery schools, right? Because as Mike found in his research, that John was also pulled aside from the rest of the apostles and had further instruction from Christ, and it's left unknown, unsaid what that instruction was. And so, again, if something's private or secret, then most people think it's a big deal, right? That's just human nature, right? That's what they say about the Freemasons, right? Because you guys are secret, you guys do some weird stuff. Well, maybe. but it's interesting, that whole theory that character arc would be really interesting. Had if he were the Lazarus character reborn into John, and then John got further mysteries later in his relationship with Christ. That's kind of cool.
And what's neat is that idea that maybe John is this. Maybe that's one of the reasons why we consider him a patron saint, is because he went through the mysteries, the raising, or whatever. But it is also interesting that, like, how long we've said he was a patron saint of Masonry. It's farther back than 1906 when Steiner gave this lecture. So, like, is that one of these things that is secretly passed down through mystery schools that has been given to certain people, and if you lucky enough to find the text on it or the lecture be there, for somebody like Steiner to give that, that's all of a sudden, in your repertoire of knowledge now. I don't know.
Juan, Jason, what have some of your research led you to?
I know that Jason was going to take his time unmuting himself.
All right.
Well, to be honest, I came more as a witness to what Mike wanted to present, and the part of the St. John the Evangelist that I'm the most interested is in that the duality between him and the Baptist when it comes to the symbolism of passionate zeal and knowledge. So it's almost as keeping us, keeping us mindful of the balance that is necessary. And I understand, like, if we were to scrutinize what the life of these two characters was like, and the characteristics that made them memorable, worthy of us hearing about them, so many centuries later, then we have something to learn from both. But my personal research on this didn't go very deep. I just kind of like went over some notes, very quick, but I just wanted to open up that side of the conversation, because I'm interested and curious as to whether it has any parallels as well with the season in which they're celebrated. Like, the evangelist would be the learned knowledge one, right? And then you have the Baptist being the one who has symbolizes passionate zeal. I don't know if you see any connection with the time of the year in which it's celebrated, or if it's just a placeholder for the solstices, and that's just the only reason why they're where they are. Anybody has any idea on that?
Well, not to make light of it or whatnot, but when I was first brought up about the fellow Mason told me about the St. John's days, and his explanation for me at the time, I didn't even know which day belonged to which at the time. And he said, the easiest way to know that St. John the Evangelist is the one in the winter is the very fact that nobody wants to get baptized in the winter.
Oh, I love it.
Now I found that amusing, but it's a good way just to remember it. But no, I do know that there is. I don't have it in the notes that I have in front of me, but I do recall there is some things about the astrological signs and so forth that relate to St. John the Evangelist and the time and the winter solstice and all that. I wish I actually had that in the notes that I have in front, but well, yeah, there is something to relate to that.
The only connection I know of is that the winter solstice is the shortest day of the year, and it's the return of the sun. Pretty much, it's the return of light.
Right.
So if you look at it from that perspective, yeah, we will become more illuminated as the day as the days progress from the winter solstice. The other one, you know, the summer,
Baptist.
summer solstice
Mhm.
would be, that would be the longest day of the year, and then that's when light is receding. We have shorter days all the way up to uh, the winter solstice. So I guess the symbolism of that's the beginning of the bringing of light.
Right. And that John the Evangelist, actually, that's what he does with his teachings. He brings us more light, more knowledge, more, where John the Baptist is a little bit more negative. I mean,
And reserved. I mean, this is a hermit that lived out, with and ate locusts and honey, right? Wore fur and just kind of was the crazy guy living out in the wilderness. So,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the things that I find interesting about the character of John the Evangelist is actually how little, frankly, we even know about this person. We know that there was a disciple named John who Jesus loved, and in the first or second century, the church made the connection between John the Evangelist and that disciple named John. So I've been reading over the past year quite a bit of study and literature by Bart D. Ehrman, who is a former student of Moody Theological Seminary, turned agnostic and author, and he focuses specifically on historical criticism of the New Testament specifically. And so, what from history can we tell about the Gospels, and then looking at the writing styles and the verbiage used and the references that these authors of these New Testament books make. What do they tell us about the authors of those books, and what do they tell us about the books themselves? And interestingly enough, I say we know very, very little about John the Evangelist, because Bart Ehrman actually identifies both the Gospel of John as well as the first, second, and third epistles of John as falsely attributed to John. So there's historical evidence, according to Bart Ehrman, that these books of the Bible were actually originally anonymous New Testament texts that had the names of apostles ascribed to them later on by the early Christian church before the canonization of Scripture. So in addition, when we get to the Apocalypse of John, or the Book of Revelation, Bart Ehrman also makes the case that the author of the Book of Revelation cannot be the same author as the author of the Gospel of John. The writing styles are just so incredibly different, and specifically, Bart Ehrman says, the Book of Revelation, the writer of the Book of Revelation, calls himself John, but he doesn't give any other allusion to or any other information about which John he was. He could have just been a John Ruark, for all we know. He didn't call himself the disciple the Lord loved, or say that he was the brother of James, or any other differentiating characteristics that we see in the Gospels and the rest of the New Testament. So from the standpoint of John the Evangelist as being the John who wrote much of the New Testament, there's very little that we actually can say for sure on that, and there's very little by extension that we actually know about the character of John. And so that's always been very intriguing to me, that we have these two figures, John the Baptist, who we know quite a bit about, more or less, both from historical records as well as from the Bible itself, and then John the Evangelist, who we frankly don't know very much about.
I want to go back to something that I think it was either Juan alluded to. Is there some sort of symbolic significance with it being on the solstice days? And I was going back and looking through stellar theology from Brown and Robert Brown. And while he tries to make these sometimes loose connections to astrology and astronomy and the symbology inside of Freemasonry, there's you said there's still not a lot of evidence as to why they picked one on one day versus the other. However, that being said, when you look at astrology and how things like a full moon actually is a symbol of death because it's already reached its full potential, and then it's going to in the future start to wane and get smaller and smaller. And so a new moon that's you can't see, it's completely hidden, is actually a sign of new life, and it starts growing and waxing until it becomes full again. So in the same vein, if you look at the John the Baptist on the summer solstice being very hermit-like and being reserved, that's the longest day of the year. Everything going forward is going to get shorter and shorter and die symbolically. Whereas once you get to the winter solstice and you celebrate the feast of St. John the Evangelist, now everything that's going to come ahead will be new life, new birth, rebirth into the springtime and that kind of thing. So you could see that evangelism, that going forth and growing, happening after St. John the Evangelist.
So like every element of every religion, when you look at it in the form of archetypes, is always a throwback to the equatorial procession. So
Absolutely.
Everything, every holiday is laid over the other. It is always about the return and descent of the sun. And one of the things that is also interesting, right, is this idea of a raising. And so that's the sun in the winter solstice. During the sun, there is a constellation that, as our the ancient mythos, gives you stories of the constellations and how they do and how they act and why they move from this point to this point over the year. And there's a story. It's always a cycle. And so the story about the sun coming back, the acacia, all of that is a certain constellation reaches down and pulls the sun, the ever living sun back. And so you can look into that. If you're a Mason and you just don't get it, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll send you some text on that. But it's really interesting stuff, and it's just incredible. I'm all about the origin, going back to the first point, but also understanding that just because it's the oldest, it doesn't mean that's the full stop origin period. That's where it came from. It's just the oldest we can get to. So it may be even older.
Freemasons didn't build the pyramids, is what you're saying.
Well, I mean,
because we talked to,
maybe we did. Who knows?
I know some guys are like dead set. Absolutely.
I'm just saying they just found the biggest crater impact ever, which they said the Younger Dryas, life killing, civilization killing thing that probably happened, never could have happened because we haven't found the impact crater. Well, we found the impact crater now just weeks ago, and it corresponds with the Younger Dryas. So maybe we have been to this point and we were all wiped out and now we're building back. So maybe Masonry is time immemorial.
Well, you think about the lost city of Atlantis.
That's precisely
of Atlantis, the very
precisely where I was going with that, Jason.
Yeah.
Thank you for going to the crazy place where I didn't want to go. Wait.
Alien. I swear it's Alien.
Well, it's like the Matrix, Matrix Reloaded, when the architect says to Neo, so this has been going on a long time. I prefer to think of time in spans of anomalies, and you are the sixth one. What if we are the sixth civilization to have been respawned from the caveman era to achieve,
That's true. Well, without making it sound too crazy,
I'm sorry, was I being crazy?
you were just bonkers. No, I'm kidding. No. What I'm gonna say about partially what RJ was mentioning, you brought to mind when you said that some people are going crazy about the pyramids. KRS-One came to mind in his video rant on Freemasonry. If you haven't seen that, just
Yeah, that was like a couple of years ago.
yeah.
He was like,
Yeah.
I got friends that are Masons, and they like told me all the secrets of 33rd degree, and I'm like legit, sort of,
Who
kind
said
of.
this?
KRS-One,
KRS-One.
Who is that?
a rapper.
It's like a legendary rapper. But
32nd, 33rd degree, excuse me.
yeah.
Wow. My most legendary rappers are like not that guy, but okay.
Apathy.
Hey man, he's gonna be up there.
No, he's been up
awesome.
there. Like he's like an old school rapper. Like you got to see this video. Because he's
All right.
he's a brilliant guy on its own. Which is like I had this train of thought when you were saying that and saying that the discovery of this crater coinciding with that mass extinction that's believed. We have to be, if we are going to exemplify that learned knowledge, symbolized by John the Evangelist, we cannot completely discard other people's opinion and other people's
Yes, we can.
well, we can because it's fun, but it's imprudent sometimes, because just like people that were, if you look at some discoveries, for example, the discoveries of the caves in there's some cave paintings up in Spain, and if I remember the name of it, I'll tell you. And this man brought his discovery over to one of these big scientific societies to give a presentation, and like they laughed him out of there. Like, this guy is stupid. Like, this is a serious place for serious discussion. Like, you have no credentials. You're just making a fool out of yourself, discrediting your name and your family. And like, come to find out, yeah, these paintings were from 30,000 years ago. The caves of Altamira. Thank you so much, Mike.
Right.
And yes, the dude was right. He sounded like an idiot to these learned people from the time, but they weren't giving space to the possibility of other truths to which they were previously deprived. So I just say this because, like, I found myself taking some really strong stances against certain topics, and as I mature, as I grow older and more learned and more handsome, don't hate, then I get to understand some of these things and get to see, oh my God, this guy I completely discredited, or completely nullified his opinion in my mind. He was right. Here's a new discovery. So I think I can stretch and extrapolate that is part of the character of the evangelist, to have that respect and restraint to be able to accept new learned knowledge. Amen.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. It's hard to follow up that act. So there's another thing I wanted to kind of go back to. When we had our episode 47, we talked about, does your lodge or any of your religious practices in your area celebrate any feast of St. John or St. John's Day celebrations? And what are some of the Masonic or non-Masonic things that you guys do? And so I wanted to open that up to the crowd to see what you guys, how you guys celebrate, if at all, St. John the Evangelist. Now, I will prime the pump and say that I know in Pennsylvania that the installation of the new officer line, including the Worshipful Master, does not happen until December 27th. So it's very late, and it's after Christmas. It's it's a little unorthodox for what we do in Virginia. It's really just you have your December elections, you're elected and installed whenever you schedule the date. But by Pennsylvania code, they're not allowed to be fully installed until December 27th.
There are some really weird laws about
Mm-hmm.
those kind of things. I've seen grand jurisdictions who mandate that lodges have to do something as a lodge for St. John the Evangelist Day or whatever the case may be. My lodge in particular Waukegan, my mother lodge, has never done anything for any of those days that I am aware of in its history, 1849. But Space Novum, we do the Feast of St. Andrew, which is a big, like, don't care about the other guys because we're pushing Scottish Masonry. But yeah, so I don't know any lodges really in our area, in my jurisdiction, that historically, in my 10 years, 11 years being a Mason, that do anything. And I've not heard of anything in Illinois that it's a set standard anywhere. So if it is, awesome. I know Nick Johnson used to do some stuff with his lodge for the feast days.
Yeah, that's true. I do recall that in Virginia, definitely in the summertime, and I believe also in the wintertime, we get the kind of a notice from the Grand Lodge that says, we encourage you, since in Freemasonry, since we do have these patron saints of the Saints John, that if you have a religious celebration, we encourage you to go do that. And that's kind of where they leave it. It's just kind of a standard thing that every Grand Master sends out, that we're not going to tell you how to worship or where to worship, but just a reminder, you got these Saints Johns, and you might as well go do what you do with them. So it's a soft touch, which I kind of like.
What I found interesting about Pennsylvania having that requirement to have is the very fact that they don't cover the Saints John in their, yeah. But it's I know that they don't, because a couple of my friends over there have talked about it. One of them actually, Jack Harley, has a presentation that's pretty good about that, and about both St. John's actually is what he does, but that's because they don't talk about them. So
fascinating. Juan, I know you were going to chime in a minute ago.
Yeah, at least here in my jurisdiction, there's a lot happening around the not for the St. John celebration, but there's elections. There's all the lodge elections are happening around this time. You have the Christmas, of course, celebration. There's different festivities and different activities that happen locally that this, St. John's doesn't seem to be one. I do hear brothers like wishing each other a happy St. John's Day or thing of that nature, but I haven't come across anything, any formal celebration that, sheds more light as to the symbolism or anything like that. But
Here's a general question, just maybe put it out to the group. As Freemasonry I'm going to say something controversial that might make people mad, but if I'm okay with it, you all should be also. Freemasonry has a foundation that is overwhelmingly Christian.
Right.
So that is irrefutable. But I will ask that. So Duke of Sussex tells us to get rid of all the religious dogma or whatever, call it the volume of sacred law, do this, do that, and the other. After all the innovations, blah, 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 blah. Let's forget how we got there, but we were there, and that is recognized Freemasonry today. Illinois even has this bit in our dedication to a lodge where they say something really interesting. And they reference two things. They say the God of Abraham, and they say the Lion of the tribe of Judah twice in two different parts in the ritual. So those two things really solidify the Christian element within the craft today, for me anyway. But is the feast of Saint John the Evangelist, is it is the reason why it's super adhered to in some states and not in other states a product of like liberalism within within the craft, a dismantling of the dogmatic kind of teachings that we've laid as a foundation for Freemasonry? um, I'm just curious on your thoughts of like why maybe it doesn't catch on, or why it isn't a tenet, and strictly adhered to, with an organization such as ours where every word counts, and we have a strict protocol for everything. And while every state has something different, largely we do everything pretty similar. So just curious on your guys' thought, why maybe we don't have this universal celebration. Like, it's known, but even still, it's kind of not known in a lot of places. Like, if you mention the Saint John, like, the only place they ever reference that is within the first degree ritual. And like, then they don't know anything else about it and they never learn, right? So thoughts?
I'm wondering if it isn't more a slackening off of traditions, that we used to, they were probably more practiced at times. But I also wonder too, if when you think about it, if and I really question myself bringing this piece into it, but if it wasn't more of a Catholic / Anglican angle and less of a Protestant direction. But I don't want to, I'm not countering any of that, or calling that either way a bad idea. It's just a question, but that may be part of the slackening off of traditions of that sort as well. I'm not sure, because my Protestant faith, when I was being brought up, I really didn't hear too much about saints directly,
Right. It's that's the thing, because it does come from like a Catholic underpinning, which has existed previous to 1717, or any of the Scottish influence, right? So one could argue towards the secularization of Freemasonry to remove the to be religious without being a religion. Okay, and that's the words mean things, right? To have the undertone and influence of the syncretic, mystery schools, including the mainstream religions at the time, Catholicism, Church of England, all that in 1717, while maintaining that the message, the macro, applies to all faiths, right? That it's something that we can unite all men under some of these common themes. Let's not argue over the detail of what my saint says versus what your saint says, right?
This is a happy day. Let's not argue about who killed who.
So that's a great point, though, because you say this is a happy day or whatever, and instantly I just go to this idea that yeah, hey, this is the most popular religion of today. It's the same thing you're all used to. It's just it's a new packaging, right? It's the new archetype. And so, the base level is just still this celebration of the foundation of, the procession.
Right.
And it's like, we pile it on, whether that is a Norse tradition, and then it's broken down, an Egyptian tradition, and it just travels across, whether you name it. Like, it's just more scoops on your ice cream cone,
And I like that, that analogy, especially when you really know the root of some of the traditions. Especially, let's talk about like in Christmas. The root of so many of the traditions, they have nothing to do with Christianity. It's not. Well, the link with Christianity is the fact that Christianity is that top, is that cherry and the
Right. Find December 25th as Jesus' birthday in the Bible, and I'll give you $5.
Yeah, I'll give them 100.
Just
It's
$5?
nowhere near there.
Historically, and like contextually, when I think whatever I read, I can't remember the name of it, so the burden of proof is on somebody else. I'm going to play that fallacy here. I read somewhere that it likely, by description, he was born in the springtime,
Correct.
which is probably more symbolic, actually, right? Like the new birth,
Right.
Mhm.
which is interesting.
Yeah, and I don't know if we've had an episode where we talk in depth about this, but I know we've talked about Mithras, and we've talked about the fact that Mithras' birth is December 25th, and during, before Christ, the celebration of, the pagan celebration of Saturnalia and all that, kind of stuff that happened along those dates, and it is the church's attempt in order to Christianize or help people. Okay, you're celebrating already, and how about we then make officially this is the time where we celebrate this. But anyway, I think we're going on a tangent with this, even though I'm fascinated by the topic and I would love to talk in depth about it.
We never go on tangents. What do you think this is?
I know.
We're only an hour show, folks.
Well, I mean, we're on the air, so
Yeah, but easy now. But what I wanted to mention is
sorry, Eric.
Love you, Eric. Love you, Jason.
But what I wanted to mention is the fact that I love Freemasonry and everything it stands for. I don't want it to be a religious organization. I don't want it to become a, I don't want it to become a religion. And I like in the Scottish Rite where there is the study of all these different traditions, and we look at all these different religions of throughout the world, and we find, okay, what are some of the truths that are found therein? And here, a wise man is going to adopt these, whether they are imparted by by Christianism, they're imparted by Islam, they could be imparted by Cookie Monster singing a song. Doesn't matter if it's a truth that can make me that more perfect Ashler. I want part of it, but I don't want that to dictate. I don't even know how to say it without like offending half of you guys. I don't want it to be a religious thing.
There you go.
I don't want it.
Never.
On that note,
Yes. Now that we know that cookies start with C, we will start wrapping things up.
And they're good enough for
Go around for final thoughts and shameless plugs, starting with Robert.
Oh, all right, fine. So I know we did the episode a long time ago, 4 years ago. We dove a little bit deeper this time around. I found it was very interesting. We've all grown spiritually and academically over these last years, diving into critical evaluations of texts and knowing way more than we ever wanted to know. And I say wanted to know, right? Because we have this, humans have this intrinsic, this thing that says inside of us, like, stay where your comfort is because you're safe there and everything feels good and your feelings are nice. And sometimes we get shell shocked when we read the facts, when we read the truly objective documentation or critical examinations of things. And if you're well founded, right, then this shouldn't bother you at all. It should give you pause, reflect, and give you new zeal and give you new energy to move forward and expand your consciousness. The Zohar gives this advice not to start the Zohar until you're ready. 40 years old, a full belly, that kind of thing, right? Have a family, you're well founded. We have a thing in our fraternity. We have a thing in our fraternity that we are well founded. This is very important. And I had a better point I was going to make, but I think I kind of lost that in my rambling here. But the thing is that if we're truly wanting to learn, then we can take these things and take them in our stride and use them as we go along. And I think we've done that over the last 4 years. Jason, you've read I think I initially introduced you to Bart Ehrman, and I had only read I think at that point 2 of his books, and I think Jason has now outread me in Ehrman texts, which is like insane because that stuff is awesome. But
I think I'm up to 4.
Jesus, yeah. I think I'm only on 3.
Some of them are repetitive, but it's okay.
Yep, that's true. But yeah, so everybody listening, thanks so much. Patreons, if you were in the Facebook, I dropped a link to that Rudolf Steiner article in the Patreon Facebook group. So thanks to those guys. You guys get first crack at that. And that's it. Thanks so much for hanging out with us and being here just a few days after Christmas. It's been awesome. So thank you all.
Good stuff. Mike the intern, you're up next.
Okay, so yeah, this was actually exactly what I was looking for. And RJ says it right, man. I mean, because when I started, when I started as a Mason, I had no idea what kind of rabbit hole I was jumping down into. I mean, I had some idea, but honestly, this stuff here, the esoteric side of all this, the religious pieces that we do, the learning in general, the whole. I mean, I had just finished college and was done doing the research there, and I love to do that. And the fact is, even with this, every day is a new research project for Masonry. There's so much to dig into. I mean, and literally so much. I can't get enough. That's why I was listening to this show in the first place back then, and now I'm on it. So
look what it got you.
Yes, deeper into the rabbit hole and trying to get out of it a little. Anyway, as RJ said, he put in that link, and I know there's a couple links out there. I'm actually going to go ahead and paste in somehow my article just so people have that out there for them with the links to the information that I had, so that I dug out of. So, all right.
Thanks for sharing.
Yep.
Sharing is caring. Next up, Juan Sepulveda. Final thoughts, shameless plugs. Go ahead.
I really enjoyed the conversation as always. I appreciate you brothers, making up for each other's slack. I didn't prepare a lot for this. I came in with what I knew and a couple of questions that I had, but I think the conversation has, it flowed in a way that I really enjoy. And I hope that some of the listeners and some of the people watching live on YouTube, they got something out of it, because we see it as a symbol. And for many Masons, the St. John's is just, a hula hoop and 2 bars and a wall. And there's so much profundity to the symbolism of it and what it can contribute to our lives. So I'm glad that we had this discussion. As I close, I want to thank all the brothers for supporting. I've said it before. If you enjoy what we do, tell a brother, especially some of the younger brothers who they still have the zeal of for the fraternity and the desire to acquire new knowledge, and they're not disillusioned by some of the obstacles that they may face in the organization. So let them know the Masonic Roundtable has close to 300 episodes now. Like, we're getting really close, and we would love for them to be a part of this. And my other shameless plug, thewindingstairs.com. I have this new collection of Masonic pop art.
Ooh.
I'm loving it, and brothers are really supporting it. And I think the brothers that have it was a very cool project to put together, and it's just the beginning. So go to thewindingstairs.com, and you can find me on my new store on Etsy in case that you're a regular shopper at Etsy. It's etsy.com/The Winding Stairs. Thank you.
Hashtag branding. Good stuff. Next up, Jason Richards.
All right. No, great episode. Appreciate everybody on the YouTube chat hanging in there with us tonight. Lots of great discussion on the YouTube chat. So you guys are awesome. Thanks so much. Yeah, looking forward to the next year with TMR. We've got a lot of fun stuff coming up. One of the things that you all may be interested in, outside of going to our Patreon page and becoming a squire or a knight, would be we've got John and I have a couple friends here in the Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia area who are putting together what will be nothing short of an amazing Masonic conference called the Mid-Atlantic Esotericon. It's going to be on June 15th. And it's going to be absolutely amazing. So John and I will be there. John is speaking. I am not. And we're going to have folks like Piers Vaughn, P.D. Newman, Frater O, R.J. Johnson, just all sorts of goodness going on there for a day of esoterically minded education. And we're going to have vendor tables as well. So Brother Edgar from Masonic Revival will be there. Brother Carl Hearn from Ascended Masters will also be there, and we may have a couple folks coming to sell some books as well. So it's going to be a really fun trip. So go ahead and get your early bird tickets now. So because they're an early bird special price right now, I believe. What is it, John? 65?
Something like that, yeah.
It's something like $65 now. In a month or two, they'll go up to the full price. One of the interesting things we're doing as well is we're taking a page out of Ezekiel Bates Lodge's playbook, and the night before we're doing a happy hour at a local brew pub. So those tickets are limited. Those tickets are free. So you definitely want to get in on that if you can. So we're looking forward to seeing everybody. It's going to be a great time. I'm really excited about what Brother Joe and Brother Kevin, or the brethren who are putting this on, have in store. It's going to be absolutely amazing.
Very cool. Yeah, just to add to that, thank you, Jason. They are planning on like Master Mason only presentations as well as open to the public. So just think about that if you want to come, because we have to make sure that you're in recognition with the Grand Lodge of Virginia before you can come to some of those presentations. But otherwise, I think it's going to be a really fun event. So I'm looking forward to that. And I want to say thank you to everyone this year who's at least picked up a copy of It's Business Time, Adapting a Corporate Path to Freemasonry. We did see a little spike before the holidays of people buying some for the officers of their lodge. And so, it means a lot. And I hope that your lodge becomes more successful in 2019 because of that. So thank you for that. If you haven't checked it out, go check it out. You send that money you got from Santa, I pick up a copy. So thank you in advance. Thanks for being a Patreon supporter. And thank you for just watching in, just tuning in. It's your first time, or if it's your 242nd time. We really do appreciate all the support. The conversations are great. We learn a little bit from you every time. And, as we ring in the new year, I want to say thank you very much for watching, and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.